All right, everybody, welcome, man. We got a whole different type of deal tonight. I am joined by my good friend, Jesse Crossan. A lot of you might know him as Second Chancer. We have been friends for a while now, and he actually, at one point, introduced me to a good friend of his who was facing a pretty serious legal battle. They had him on charges of attempted murder, terroristic threats, a whole bunch of stuff. So I get a call one day from my good friend, Jesse, and he's like, hey, I've got a guy that wants to talk to you. He kind of wants to know a little bit of the ins and outs about prison. He's like, he's really anxious about this case that he's facing. And I'm like thinking, is this like Get Hard with Chris Rock and Will Ferrell? Like, does this dude need like classes to get tough before he goes to prison? But I was like, sure, Jess, have him call me. And me and Rich ended up becoming really, really good friends. It was a super big blessing that Jesse bestowed upon me to introduce me to him. And we're going to be talking a bit about his trial because it is one of the most insane trials that I've ever heard. So, Jesse, thank you so much for joining us tonight, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And it's nice. I've been up there watching the trial all week, and it's been stressful because as somebody who's been through a trial, as somebody who's been to prison, who knows what that feels like, watching somebody that I care about, when somebody who I know to be innocent going through that. Look, this is just the craziest case. When we get into the details, nobody has ever seen anything like this. The lawyers said they've never seen anything like this. I mean, it's just bizarre. But watching that and feeling powerless, like this has been a rough week for me, though I know it hadn't been half as rough as it has been for Rich.
Absolutely. And I'm going to be really honest with you. Like, I've always kind of felt like, I see things, we always view things through our own lens. And I beat a case that I was dead guilty of. And so I've had a lot more faith in our judicial system as far as like, if you're in there and you're convicted, then you're guilty. But seeing the way that they tried to railroad this man really opened up my eyes a lot to how easily someone can end up in prison for something that they shouldn't be there for. On top of that, Rich has many resources. So he was able to pool resources to be able to get an incredible legal team, to be able to, amass massive amounts of evidence in his defense. And most people just don't have that. So it's pretty crazy to me how eye-opening it's been. I with a public defender, I think he'd be in prison right now.
I mean, I think just without the resources he had, if he hadn't made bail, he would have still been sitting in jail for all that time. If he hadn't been able to hire a good lawyer, somebody would have pushed him into a deal. His first lawyer tried to push him into a deal before even looking at the lack of evidence. His lawyer's like, wow, well, we can cut you a deal. Here's what we should do. And this is the standard. Like the justice system is designed for plea bargains because going to trial would be too burdensome. It would take too much time. So instead they push people into plea bargains and they don't take into account that some people are actually innocent. Like, that works great if you actually committed the crime and you get a deal and you can like change your life. That doesn't work so well if you're actually innocent.
Yeah, and let's just talk about the plea bargains that he got for a second, because what he was facing if he got convicted was 25 years to life.
And that was on one charge. So if they stacked all the charges, he could have, had 100 years.
Yeah, and that's just an indicator of how serious this case would be if he got hit. They came at him. His first plea bargain was wasn't it for 15 to 18 months?
I think it was like 12 to 18 months.
And then they came back at him. He told them to rub it on their chest. And then they came back at him with 11 months. That's how bad they knew their case was. And when he told them he wasn't going to go for it, it seemed like the prosecutor got really upset and went even harder after him. Would you say that's true?
They brought new charges on the day of trial. Have you ever in your life heard of somebody like you have no chance to prepare? We're bringing new charges the day of trial. How is that even sane?
I don't think in most places, I don't think that that's legal to do. Now, I think it's really poignant to mention that Pennsylvania is a Commonwealth state, and Commonwealth states play by a different set of rules than the rest of the states in the union for the most part. Would you say that seems fair?
I'm from Virginia, which is a Commonwealth state, but there are certain things that I've never seen. Like they have something called an affiant. This is a police detective who sits at the trial, basically prosecutor's desk, watches the whole proceeding, and then testifies. And the whole point is no witness who's going to testify is allowed to sit in the hearing because they're going to become biased by all the things they hear. So instead, they're like, you know what? We're going to institutionalize this. We're going to give the final guy, the final witness, all the information, let him sit in, let him figure out how to craft his strategy. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life. And on top of that, a number of the judge's rulings, including allowing them to bring new charges a day at trial, were just horrible. Like, there were probably 10 things that would have been overturned on appeal. But the judge was really happy that that wasn't the case. And we'll get into that later. But I have never seen such poor conduct by the officers, by the police, by the prosecutors, or by the judge. It just all around was a shit show.
Yeah, and so I understand that he's through with the actual criminal case. He does have some stuff coming up besides that as a follow-up. And I don't know how into detail we are allowed to get about any of that. But I've seen the body cam videos. Have you seen the body cam videos of when the police showed up?
It is the most Huckleberry Finn, insane country boss hog thing I've ever seen in my life.
Bro, I'm surprised there was like 3 teeth between all of these cops, bro. There was one sane, rational officer there who was like, wait, we're charging him, not him, right? And they're like, no, we're charging the fat colored guy. I was like, what is going on? What are they saying with their mouths? It was insane.
And you couldn't write this. The cop who you're talking about, the main cop who was terrible, his name is Jack Asper. Hey, Jack Asper. So he is on body cam calling on the radio before he gets to the scene and telling him who the aggressor is. How are you, not having been there or seen anything, going to tell them who the aggressor is? And then how are you going to argue with the person who was the first on scene, who actually started to conduct an investigation, and tell him he's wrong? Let's start at the beginning, just so people have some context. So this was, I believe, May 1st of 2022. Richard owns a doggy daycare. He wrote a pet center, basically. And he gets a call from his son. His son is running the daycare. And he says, Dad, there's some crazy guy here. He's like threatening us, and I don't know what's going on. He says he's going to burn this place down. He says he's going to shoot us. Like, what do I do? And he says, well, guess what? I mean, it's a big metal building, so there's not a lot of security. So he says, hey, go lock yourself and all the dogs and all the employees in this one room. Lock all the doors. I'm calling the police. Like, he did the right thing. Calls the police. He says, hey, there's some crazy guy with a gun at my property threatening my son. Can you please get there? This is about an hour before anything happens, just to give you an idea. They say, oh, well, sorry, where are you at? Like, we don't have any officers. We'll talk about it. And they bounce it back and forth between 2 counties. Finally, the last thing they say when he's on his way back, when he's freaking out, is, okay, we'll dispatch an officer when you get a chance. So he's on his way there. He talks to his son again. His son says, hey, this guy is back. He said he was going to come back with somebody. Like, Dad, what do I do? I'm scared. And he says, look, don't worry. So he calls the cops again. He says, hey, where's that officer at? And the guy says, or excuse me, the responder says, oh, we don't have anything on the board. Have you called before? Is there an issue? So we have a guy with a gun and nobody's responding to this. They once again go back to sending him back and forth between counties, not responding. All while there is a supervisor at a station, and this was his direct testimony. He said, I took the long way because the front way they were paving, and the long way took me about 3 minutes to get there. So literally the whole time, somebody is 3 minutes away from responding to this and doesn't do it because, in his words at trial, it was just a property dispute, so I didn't think I needed to intervene. I don't know about you, but if somebody is waving a gun at my child, I'm considering that a lot more than a property dispute. But, he does his job. So then they go forward. He gets to the place and he says, hey, what's going on? What are we doing? He talks to his son, and they see this same car, the same white Cadillac with the guy in it, parked in the field across from them. They go, what is he doing? And somebody's walking through the woods. So he's like, he said he was going to come back. He was going to kill us. Hey, you get people inside. We're going to get the guns. His son's a sports shooter. He does the 3-gun thing where you have like shotgun, pistol, and rifle. So they went and they grabbed their guns. They threw them in the car. Gets back on the phone with 911. Still haven't dispatched an officer. Still say, sorry, we don't have anybody available when we can. They said there's a motherfucker in the field with a gun. You need to get somebody here right now. He's threatened my kids. He's threatened my dogs. He's threatened my employees. And still nothing. So finally, he's like, I don't know what to do. Like, the car's over there. He sees a guy walk away from the car who he thinks is a guy. It turns out they're actually 2 individuals. And so 911 says, hey, sir, can you safely go over there and get a license plate? So that way, if he gets away, you at least know what happened. Like, you know who this was. He says, sure, I can do it. So he drives around. And by the time he gets around, because these 2 properties are next to each other, the car is gone. And he goes, that's not possible. This guy was in the field. And again, he finally realized there were actually 2 people. The guy was still in the car at the time. This was somebody else who was walking on the property. And he didn't know who this is, by the way. Like, they own this property, and next door are 2 90-year-old farmers. Like, this guy doesn't live there as far as he knows, doesn't have anything to do with him. Nobody's ever seen him before. So he goes up, and he's pulling up the hill to try to see where the car is, to try to get the license plate. He pulls up. The guy pulls up in front of him. So now they're like nose to nose. He doesn't know who this guy is. They both get out. They start yelling at each other. And Richard says, you pulled a fucking gun on my son. Like, he's scared. He's angry. He doesn't know what's going on. He just wants to get the license plate. The guy yells back and forth. He tells him he's a pagan. He tells him all these things. And then he drives by. By the way, Richard's on 911 for all this. Literally on 911 saying this fucking guy is threatening me. Like, you need to get somebody here.
Let me interject real quick for those of you who don't know. When the dude said he's a pagan, what he means is that he is a pagan 1% motorcycle club member. He's saying that he's an outlaw biker in a motorcycle club that you have to be patched into. I know the pagans. I've hung out with a lot of pagans. It turns out that this dude is actually a convicted sex offender, and the pagans would literally skin this dude alive if they knew that he was out here claiming to be a pagan with what he has on his jacket as far as a conviction. Sorry, I had to interject that.
No, absolutely. So Richard, he knows what's going on. He's scared. And by the way, you showed a picture in your video of this guy. He looks like the Unabomber. That was actually the opening statement. He looks like the Unabomber. He's screaming. He's foaming at the mouth. Like, this is a dangerous, scary guy. So finally, he drives past angrily, basically kind of like swipes into Richard. There's a whole lot that goes back and forth that's up in contention that I won't get into. But while Richard's on 911, after the car drives by, he reads the license plate to them. And I want to be clear that later this guy's statement, this guy's name is Ken Knight, is that Richard jumped on top of the car, spread eagle like a sniper, and shot his gas tank out and shot his back window out. And the crazy part of this is the police lieutenant testified at the preliminary hearing that everything Ken Knight said was true. The only problem is the window wasn't shot out. The gas tank wasn't. In fact, the back of the car wasn't shot at all. Like, they actually testified to saying all these things were true that were factually impossible. So he goes away. Yeah, Ken Knight says the guy shot in the back tank and I had to go get him because I had to save my family, because it turns out the people who live up the hill are his parents, even though he doesn't live there. Richard says, I don't know what's going on. I got back in my car and he ran me from behind. And they had an expert, a crash scene reconstruction, everything that showed the car was hit 2 to 3 times, 1 time in the rear, 1 time in the side for sure, and they think another time inside.
Well, it's a Tesla. It's a purple Tesla on pink rims. It is one of the most flamboyant but sweet rides I've ever seen. So Teslas have these computers in them, you guys, and it will document anytime there's any type of collision, anytime that anything hits the body of the car, there's documents. So there's absolute documents to back up everything that Rich is saying in this.
Yeah. And then, so Ken Knight's story just doesn't make any sense. He basically contradicts himself repeatedly in the police report, in the preliminary, and on the stand at trial. For whatever reason they believe him, I don't know. So what Richard says happens, and what the evidence says happens, because I talked to the crime scene reconstruction expert, is that he hits him from behind, pulls back, hits him again, and then pulls back and is going to drive into him again. This is a point at which Richard had the rifle in the car, opens fire. And this is all while he is on 911. The 911 dispatcher is hearing him say, oh, fuck, he's going to hit me. Smash. Oh, fuck. Smash. The car got moved 20 feet. Imagine how hard you have to be hit to be moved broadside 20 feet. Yeah. So Richard opens fire. He didn't know what happened. He shot basically through the window. All the rounds were in the car, so he clearly wasn't like on top of the car as a sniper doing whatever Ken Knight said. And then Ken Knight hits him one more time. The car stopped. Richard doesn't know what's going on. He gets out, and he looks around, and he says, Ken Knight is getting out of the side of the car. Ken Knight says, I tried to get out because I was afraid I was dying, and this guy just starts attacking me. Richard said, I walked around the side of the car, and I said, I'm not going to let that guy get near my kid. I was still angry. I said, you fucking pulled a gun on my kid. They go back and forth. They wrestle to the ground. So here's the crazy thing. Now the cops are finally on the way because somebody has been shot. Or actually, it turns out they hadn't been shot, but that's what they knew. So when the cops get there, Richard is on 911 saying, put your fucking hands up. The cops are on their way. Now, if I was going to kill somebody, if I was going to be a bad person, I don't think I would be on 911 telling them that the cops are on the way, telling the cops to come meet me at the place that I'm going to kill this person. This just isn't consistent. So he goes, the cop comes, the cop first of all pulls a gun on his son, who has now arrived because he doesn't know what's going on. And he wants to make sure he's okay. And Richard says, no, I'm the shooter. I'm the one. Point the gun at me. So the cop does. He says, drop the rifle or drop the shotgun or rifle, whatever he had. He puts it down. The guy says, get on the ground. He said, sir, do you want me to get away from the weapon before I get on the ground? And he goes, yeah, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So clearly this guy is just overwhelmed. He's a supervisor. He didn't know what he's doing. He backs away. They put him in handcuffs. They check people out. And this is the officer who, at the conclusion of the investigation, went up to this guy, this Jack Asper guy, and said, so what are you thinking? And Jack Asper says, attempted murder. And he says, oh, on the guy driving the Cadillac, right? He says, no, on the fat foreign guy. And he goes, are you serious? He was a sitting duck. He was defending himself. You don't really mean that, do you? He said, yeah, I do. And his chink son. And I'm like, did you really just on body cam call this guy's son by a racial like, are you serious? Where are we at? And this guy still has a job, by the way. This guy is still a licensed police officer carrying a gun and arresting people right now in York, Pennsylvania. Explain that shit to me.
I think he said at least like 3 different racial slurs while I was watching the body cam footage.
It's insane. And in the middle of the investigation that they start, he literally pulls all the other cops away and says, hey guys, I got to tell you about how fast my truck is. I turned my lights on. I made it from this side of the county faster than I ever have. Man, y'all got to come. We got to race sometimes. So during the investigation where he's accusing somebody of attempted murder, he pulls him away for a 15-minute powwow about how big his truck is. Like, this is the culture we're dealing with. Anyways, so Richard goes to the hospital because during the course of this, he was hit by the car. Ken Knight goes to the hospital because he had fragments in his face that prosecution claimed were bullet fragments. Actually, at one point, they claimed were birdshot, even though a shotgun was never fired. The expert says could have been, from an airbag, display or discharge from an airbag. So it's unclear what was in his face, but it's clear he didn't get shot in the face, because if you get shot in the face with an AR, you're not going to like go to the hospital and be released the next day with no injuries. So Richard goes to the hospital. He got hit by the car. His leg was injured. His shoulder was injured. And he's in handcuffs. This officer walks up to him, just takes the handcuffs off and says, okay, have a nice day, and walks away. So as far as he knows, this is over. He's like, oh, they finally decided to, arrest that crazy guy who came over and threatened my son. Well, good. We're done. So he just goes on about his life. He continues to operate the business. He just continues to do what he can. He actually goes out of town. So he's on vacation with his daughter in South America. This is about a month later, and he gets a call. And the call says, hey, Mr. Starks, we need you back in York, Pennsylvania. We're going to press charges of assault. And so he calls this lawyer, and his lawyer said, hey, this is what they do. They just charge both parties, and then that way the DA can work it out, and they just drop the charges. But that way they don't lose the case. We can work this out. So he's in a non-extradition country. He's thousands of miles away, and he could have stayed. But instead, he gets on a plane, drops his daughter off in Florida, comes back up there, and appears at the hearing on Monday. So he appears at the hearing, and the judge is like, well, I don't know about giving you a bond. And he says, sir, I was in a non-extradition country when you called me. I could have stayed there. I came back here. My son volunteers with the fire department. We own this business. We own this land. I'm clearly not going anywhere. This is where it starts getting really crazy, because the judge says, hey, well, I need you to be on an ankle monitor. And he says, sure, no problem. I'll be on an ankle monitor. He says, all right, well, I'm remanding you to York Prison, which is actually a jail. I don't know why they call it prison, for an ankle monitor, and then you can be released. So he was given a bond. His bail bondsman actually signed for it in the courtroom, and they sent him to the prison to get an ankle monitor. The only problem is they don't do ankle monitors at the prison. They do it at probation parole. So he's taken in, and then he's actually released because he's paid his bond. But they don't let him go because he doesn't have an ankle monitor. So they stick him in a strip cell, a suicide cell, where he's wearing the turtle suit, where he's basically can't read anything, can't do anything, doesn't even have warm clothes, can't have sheets or blankets, because they say he's a suicide risk. They put him in that cell and don't tell him anything. And a day goes by, and another day goes by. And this is a man who is innocent of everything that he's done and has actually paid a bond to get out of prison. Innocent until proven guilty, my ass. So the third day finally comes by. He doesn't know what's going on. Nobody will talk to him. Nobody has contacted his son. Nobody's explained where he's at. Nobody knows what's going on. So he sees this guard who has a canine badge. And he says, hey, you like canines? I train canines. I've got a doggy daycare. I train dogs for veterans. And they get to talking and they go. And the guy asks him, he's like, why are you back here? What's going on? He tells him, he comes back and he says, man, you're fucked. They didn't put you in because you had been released. You're on the reentry docket, so nobody's seen you. You have to get a mental health evaluation, but nobody has you on the record because you've been released. And we don't do ankle monitors. So I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm going to get you to see a counselor. So thankfully, they get him to see a counselor the next day. And the amazing thing is, while he's waiting to see the counselor, this is really the moment that kind of changed him. This is 3 days in solitary confinement, in a turtle suit, by the way. They sit him in the counselor's office, or in the line for the counselor's office, and this guy comes and sits down next to him, and the guy's talking on the phone on the tablet. They have these tablets you can hook up to an earpiece and you can talk. And he says, man, I will give you $100 if you tell whoever you're talking to call my son, tell him I'm okay, and tell him to call around and find out what's going on. Cool. The guy does it. The guy calls his son. It's the first time his son has heard from him in the 3 days that he's been arrested and gone with no explanation. So finally, he goes to see the counselor. They start figuring it out. They manage to call this probation officer. And out of this whole affair, the police, the prosecutors, and the judge, this probation officer is the only hero, because she actually shows up and says, wait a minute, this isn't right. We need to address this. This man should not be sitting in jail to get an ankle monitor they don't offer in jail. She goes out of her way and misses one of her son's sport practices to come to the jail to talk to Richard. She goes out of her way. She says, I can't get you out tonight, but I'll get you out tomorrow. Let's figure this out. So after the counselor, they moved him into a dormitory. and he's trying to use the phone, but the problem is he was never taken into the system. He's been released. So he can't use a PIN, so he can't make a call. And that same guy who made the call for him before, who Richard saw had 43 cents on his books, they get to talking, and the guy says, yeah, I just did 20 years, and I'm going back for 14 months, and, my wife's out there, and she can't pay for stuff, and I was supposed to take care of the kids, and it's just a bad situation. He says, but, man, I see you trying to call, and we get a free 5-minute phone call every Monday, and I didn't use mine this week, so if you want, you can have my 5-minute phone call. This guy who literally has 43 cents to his name, nothing, is willing to give his only phone call to Richard so he can call his family because he knows he hadn't talked to them. And when Richard told me this, when he talked about this, he is just streaming tears. And Rich is not the guy who's normally streaming tears, but you can tell how much this meant to him. So he does that, and he gets on the phone. He says, Christian, his son's Christian, my God, I love you. Like, I'm okay. Like, here's what we need to do. Talk to the probation officer. We're going to figure this out. And I need you to do me a favor. Take my debit card and pull out everybody cash from my checking account. I need you to take it to this woman. Because this guy he'd been talking to was talking about how his kids didn't have enough to eat. He didn't know I was going to take care of him. And he took all that money and he gave it to the woman who had called Christian in the first place. And he said, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure you're okay. And the whole time that guy was down, put money on his books, made sure he was okay, made sure his wife was okay. When he got out, paid for his CDL school, and now he's a long-haul trucker. He literally went from a guy who was in and out of prison, who didn't have any hope. One person basically took an interest in him. One person gave him a chance, and now he's supporting himself. He's supporting his family, he's supporting his kids, and he has a grandkid that he's supporting, all because somebody gave him a chance and paid for his education. So Richard's finally out at this point. He's thinking, clearly they're going to figure this out. Like, clearly they're going to look at the evidence and realize this is a mistake. We don't have to worry about it. But a month goes by, and then 2 months go by, and then 3 months go by. And by the way, there are like hearings with the judge that are ridiculous. You're supposed to have what's called a speedy trial, right? Which means while you're in prison, they have a certain amount of time. It's usually 6 to 8 months. If you're out of prison, you're out of jail, it's usually 12 months. They have to bring the trial by that date. But if you defer, you say, hey, I'll waive my speedy trial right, well, then they can take longer. So every time they filed a motion, the DA would say, hey, we need to read this. We need to read this motion. Like, we need more time, judge. And they would count it against him because he said, well, you filed the motion, so it counts against you. So you don't have to do speedy trial because you made the DA work, which is the most mind-boggling thing. And again, one of about 100 things that could have been reversed on appeal. So finally, yeah, he's still sitting here. He manages to get off the ankle monitor because he goes to a different judge, and the judge says, yeah, if you own property here, if your son volunteers at the fire, like, yeah, we're not going to do that. You're good. So he gets off that, and his probation officer continues. He gets assigned to her. She continues to help him out, and she says, hey, you're getting a raw deal. Like, I'm going to try to make sure you're okay, but there's really not a lot I can do. So a lot of things happen, a lot of harassment. Ken Knight continues to come back to this place repeatedly and harass his son and threaten customers, and he can't do anything. Because he asks the judge, he goes in front of the judge at one of these hearings and says, sir, can you please instruct him? Can you get me a restraining order? Like, this man is scaring my son. He's harassing my son. I believe he's going to hurt my son for what happened. And the judge says, sorry, like, there's no mechanism by which the defendant can actually get protection from the victim. Like, you shouldn't have shot him. That's literally what he says. So at this point, this guy is allowed to harass his son. He's allowed to ride up and down the road. He's allowed to make menacing statements. He's the one literally making terroristic threats. By the way, he did this in the courtroom. He did this while the police were interviewing on body cam. He did this during the police interview at the police station. He did this at the preliminary hearing, and he did this from the stand at trial. Each time he threatened to kill Richard Starks. Like, if anybody's going to get charged with terroristic threats, it should be the guy who's on record with the police there. Because if you're going to say that in front of the police, what are you going to say when the police aren't around? Like, how crazy are you?
I think it's also pretty insane what he said to the prosecutor, the dude trying to help him with this case, these charges, because he pressed charges against Rich. Yep. So this dude is helping you press these charges to get justice for what you say happened. And the prosecutor happened to be gay. And he was saying homophobic, crazy slurs at the prosecutor in court, like on record in court, which is just wild as hell to me.
And if it gives you an idea of who this guy was, he showed up at the preliminary hearing, not wearing a suit, not wearing a button-up shirt, wearing a sleeveless T-shirt that says "The South will rise again" with jeans and dirty boots. Now, this is Pennsylvania, mind you. Like, I don't know what the South has to do with Pennsylvania, but I'm pretty sure they lost or they weren't there. But when you take the Confederacy and put it in Pennsylvania, all you're saying is I'm racist. You're not saying I have Southern pride. You're saying I'm racist. And that's exactly what he did. Because he was not, Jack Asper was not the only one throwing racial slurs around. So anyways, all this happens. Each step of the way, I'm telling Richard, having reviewed the case, hey, they just messed up. They're going to drop this. Like, they have no choice but to drop it. There's no evidence. Like, literally, the things they testified to in court are factually untrue. There's no way they're going to have this. They schedule a trial. They schedule it for October. And he's like, Jesse, what is going on? Like, how are they going to take me to trial? I said, man, they're going to scare you. They're going to give you a plea bargain, and then they're going to drop it at trial, because I see that all the time. They realize their case
That's what I was telling him too the entire time. I'm like, they're going to come at you with a couple plea bargains. They'll probably come at you with the third plea bargain the morning of trial. When you tell them to rub that on their chest, they're going to drop it. They have no choice. There's no case.
Yeah. Instead, Richard's lawyer had a heart attack. So the trial's postponed. His lawyer ends up being okay, thankfully, but he doesn't know what to do. And finally, he's through, months and months of more agony, of wondering, of getting. And so then he goes, April 1st, they schedule a trial. They offer that first plea of 12 to 18 months. He turns it down. They offer the next plea of 11 months, just jail time, no prison. He turns it down. And then they actually start trial. Like, I went there expecting to be like, oh, Your Honor, we withdraw all charges. No, they started. They gave an opening statement. And let me tell you, these district attorneys were not particularly skilled or talented, because his opening statement, he stuttered. He was going over a PowerPoint, half of which got excluded, by the way, because it was just totally not factual. He doesn't do a good job. And the jury's kind of like, this doesn't really make sense, but okay. The defense gives a great opening statement, and they bring in their first witness. And this was the first responding officer, the one who is literally on body cam saying, yeah, you can't charge him. He's the victim. He was a sitting duck. He had no choice but to shoot because that crazy guy was ramming him. So now this guy has to stand for the prosecution and say, yeah, you should arrest Richard, because even though I said he was innocent, and even though I'm the one who knows the most about the case, I should say that he's not. I mean, it's just absurd. And he was so profoundly uncomfortable. Like, he was put in a spot where, I guess, just to keep his job, he had to do that. It didn't make any sense. The next witness is Ken Knight. Now, they warned me about Ken Knight, but I have never in my life seen such a Yosemite Sam crazy spectacle. Literally, there were two guys who walked into the courtroom when he was testifying. And during a break, I went out and I went to the elevator to go get a cup of coffee. And I asked one of the guys, I said, oh, what are you doing here? He said, oh, I was just watching. I said, oh, what is your capacity? I'm thinking he's like a reporter or something. He says, no, I just started the district attorney's office. I said, oh, are you training or learning? He's like, no, man, everybody in the office is talking about this shit. I had to come see this guy. That's the craziest shit I've ever seen in my life. So when the district attorney, like, trainees are coming in to laugh at the witness, who is the victim, clearly something is wrong here. And I will admit, I lost my cool for a moment, because I was trying not to laugh, even though the jury was openly laughing. There was a moment where, besides all the crazy things he said and the times he conflicted himself, the lawyer was trying to get him to admit on record that he had said at the preliminary hearing that if he had had a gun, he would have killed Richard Starks. And he said, nope, I didn't say that. He said, well, sir, here is the transcript from the preliminary hearing. He said, I can't read. Okay, well, that's not a great defense. But he says, sir, you said on this day, he said, well, I didn't say it then, but I'm saying it now. If I'd had a gun, I would have killed him. I just lost it. You literally spent 5 minutes arguing that you didn't say that, and then said you would have killed him, that you had murderous intent. Which, by the way, for self-defense, if you're in fear of your life, somebody having murderous intent is a really good reason to be in fear of your life. So he literally just made the self-defense case right there. But guess what? They didn't drop it. They were like, no, we're going to continue. So the next day, the end of that day, they were starting with a woman named Tammy. And what was so weird is they said, why are they calling her? Because her statement on body cam, her sworn statement, and her statement at the police station all supported Richard's version of events, which was that he was rammed at least twice before he opened fire. Ken Knight said, no, he shot me in the gas tank. He shot me in the back window. He shot me in the front. He jumped up on the car like a sniper. And she said, none of that is true. That's not what happened. I saw the crash happen first and then the shots. So they said, well, why would the prosecutor call her if they would completely kill the prosecution's case? Like, that doesn't make any sense. She gets up on stand and she testifies to something completely different. Instead of 2 crashes, there's only one. Instead of 2 times of shooting, there's only one. And the shooting definitely came first. And I looked at the transcripts from her original statement. It literally says, no, the crash definitely came first and the shooting definitely came from inside the Tesla. This time she said, no, the shooting definitely happened first and he was definitely shooting from outside the Tesla. Like, you could not get any more patently opposite than that. So either she lied in her police report or she committed perjury. Now, here's the worst part. They had a sidebar. They said, Your Honor, this is unacceptable. Once she left and once the jury left, because they want to taint the jury. And the prosecution said, no, well, we didn't know she was going to change her story. And then they slipped up and said, oh, well, we knew she was going to change part of her story, but not that story. And in the legal proceeding, anytime the prosecution discovers new evidence, they have an obligation to turn it over, especially when you make a request for Brady evidence. They didn't do that. They didn't disclose that conversation. They didn't disclose 3 more conversations they disclosed that night, saying, oh, yeah, sorry, we forgot to tell you, but we talked to so-and-so and so-and-so. We found out these things, all of which, by the way, were exculpatory. So we realized they knew she was changing her statement, and that's why they called her. They knew, and they didn't tell anybody. Okay. So that's a Brady violation. That's a mistrial. So they get up, they say, Your Honor, we're going to file a bunch of motions. We need to be here early in the morning because he is going to lose his license. This man literally just committed a Brady violation. That is unethical. He should not practice. So we go through this whole thing. The next morning we come in and nobody got any sleep that night because it seemed like the case was lost. But what we started to realize in the middle of the night is like, okay, our case is bad, but like their case is worse because now their prime witness is literally given 3 statements that are all conflicting. And then you have to have the police come on the stand, and he either has to say, yes, she said that, or no. So either he's lying or she's lying. And I got a feeling he's going to say, no, she's lying, rather than saying he's lying. But he swore to that statement in the beginning. So if any time in the future he's been impugned, he will never be able to testify at a trial again. So that cop basically is useless. He'll never be able to do his job again. So in the morning, we walk in. Nobody's gotten any sleep. Everybody's scared to death. The cop, the Affian who sits at the desk, is not there. And there's some guy in a really nice suit at the back of the room. And we're like, what is going on? And they all go into a room in the sidebar and they come out, and I've never seen defense attorneys smiling as big as they were smiling. And he just basically pats Richard on the shoulder, and the prosecution starts, and they say, in light of recent developments, we have an ethical responsibility to withdraw all charges because there is no evidence to support this conviction. Now, even though she lied and changed her testimony, what this means is there was no evidence to support this conviction from the beginning. So they put this man through 2 years of hell. He lost his business. He lost his relationship. He lost $250,000 paying for his defense. And here's the man now. Hello, Richard Starks, recently free man who's no longer dealing with a bogus charge.
And now going by the name Dickie.
I mean, my grandfather went by Dickie, and as a kid, I always wondered how old you had to be to finally use that name. So
you definitely got there.
You got enough gray in your beard. You're good.
Right. It wasn't gray before these charges.
I believe
Man, feel that.
So we just ran over the overviewer case, and there were a couple moments. The moment when you heard them say, we withdraw all charges with prejudice, what did you think? What did you feel?
I didn't really feel anything. Like at that point, it was so weird because I expected that to happen so many times prior to that I don't think I processed it. Like I was looking to everybody else to see if this was real, or if I was getting ready to wake up and it was just going to be a bad dream.
You know, we talked earlier today, and you gave some really emotional statements. Talking about the man in the jail who connected you with their son when they wouldn't tell you where he was, or tell him where you were, or tell him what was going on. And the moment that really struck me, I wish we would have been able to have cameras in the courthouse, was I managed to get outside and text Christian, and I said, hey, he's free, he's good. He was running down to the store to get you Tums because your stomach was hurting. You walked out of the courtroom. He wasn't allowed to be in the courtroom because he was a witness, so he had to be sequestered. You see each other, and you just run together, and you grab him, and you hug him, and I just see the tears and the sadness and the joy in your eyes. And I think about it, that was the full circle, because this all started because you loved your son, and you were scared to death that somebody was going to hurt him. And that was a moment where you were reconnected with your son and able to tell him, hey, you're safe and I'm safe. Like, we're back together again, and we don't have anything to worry about. And you guys both went through hell, but you were back together again.
And, you know, the backstory of that is we weren't allowed to communicate for 2 years because of him being a state witness. So every time we talked or every time we interacted, there was always that fear that I would get in trouble because, like, the judge told me I wasn't allowed to come to my business because the supposed victim was coming by and, you know, and threatening my son. And they're like, there's no law that keeps the victim away from the defendant, but if you're there, you're going to prison.
It's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
I wasn't allowed to be at my business. I wasn't allowed to talk to my son. I wasn't allowed to talk to my employees. I wasn't allowed to help them with work. So, you know, it was like we were doing these secret drug deals whenever we would get together and meet in fear that somebody would see us together and report us.
It's insane.
So look, I want to point out one thing here. What they have always told us to do in society, if there's this type of an altercation, is to call 911, which, Rich, you did immediately as you turned your car around.
An hour.
Yeah, you were on the phone with them for an hour. They did not show up. The police failed to do what their job is, how they were supposed to respond in this type of a situation, which left you to have to protect your property, your life, your son, your family, all on your own. Then when you did what you needed to do, they tried to run you through the ringer, even though you were the one who was attacked first. Yeah. That is insane.
And what's even more insane is the police have no duty to respond or no duty to protect you.
Yeah, the
Like,
protect and serve thing has been out the window for quite. It was just a slogan that the LAPD used as public relations because they were beating up people of color so bad for so long that they were like, damn, we need an image change. Let's paint this on the side of our cars.
Yep.
And I wanted to say everything we talked about today, when Richard first reached out to me and told me this story, I remember putting it on mute and being like, who the F is this crazy guy making this shit up? And then I started to see little bits of evidence, and then I looked at all the evidence, the tapes, the recordings, the documents, and I realized, like, holy shit, they literally just said that Ken Knight rammed into the right side of Richard's car, and the right side of Richard's car didn't have a single dent on it. Like, did they really just submit something that is just factually untrue? And if I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't have believed it. And JD, I think I warned you. I was like, hey, man, he wants to talk to you, and he's going to tell you some stuff, and it's going to sound crazy, but believe it or not, it's all true. And it was.
Can you hear JD? I can't.
JD, we can't hear you. We can't.
Oh, he's told me multiple times through our friendship. I know how this sounds, homie. I'm not lying, though. I know how this sounds.
Well, I don't even want to say it because it doesn't sound true. Jesse, tell him what happened at lunch today. Where I'm going tomorrow.
So you were going to the Drake, Lil Wayne, and Lil Durk concert, and you're going to be backstage with their videographer. And I think they're going to help you celebrate your not guilty, or excuse me, the dismissal of all charges.
Yeah. So I mean, from courtroom to backstage with Drake, Lil Wayne, and Durk, and they want to meet me because of beating this case and what I went through, and they've been hearing about it from the videographer for the past 2 years, who's a really good friend of ours. So I mean, most people would never get that opportunity, let alone the day after they're acquitted of this, or not acquitted, but charges are dropped.
That's so fire.
I just and the main thing for me was I wanted you to have one of those experiences. That was I was glad to be able to go out to dinner with you. That's why I bought lunch today. I was like, you know what, man, you deserve to relax because you haven't eaten, you haven't slept in about 2 years, and it's about time to eat something.
No, it really is, and
it's the most surreal experience whatsoever. Like you always see these self-defense cases on TV, and they're like, oh, why didn't you call 911? Why didn't you call for help?
Why didn't you do this if you were in fear?
And I did all the right things. I did everything that they tell you to do. I didn't go over there until 911 asked me to go over there and get the license plate.
I didn't not call 911 even after the shooting when he got out and he was injured. I went and called 911 and demanded
Dickie.
help for him. Yep.
Yo, homie, is your finger over your mic on your phone?
No, I've got a
mic on up here. Is it better?
Oh, yeah. Can you pull that out a little bit? Everybody's saying they can barely hear you.
Yeah, of course. I'm sorry. It's reading good on mine. I apologize.
No, you're good, man. Sometimes we have technical difficulties. Look, I just want to say this, man. If you go backstage and you see Diddy back there, bro, just say no.
Maybe. It might be one of the life experiences you got to do.
You sound so much better now. Thank you for adjusting that,
No
homie.
worries. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's the wildest thing, and I thought my experience was wild, being sentenced to twice the high point of the guidelines, and then getting out and being able to be on social media and travel. But your story, because I remember you're like, yeah, I know this guy used to play football who runs a weed company. I was like, yeah, I don't think that's true. Oh, yeah, he's real. He was in the courtroom. Like, okay, that's cool. Oh, I know this guy who's the videographer for Little Durk. I was like, all right, bro, whatever. Oh no, Joe, nice to meet you. Oh, you're real? You're gonna edit my videos too? The life you have and the life you live now is just one of the most extraordinary, insane things I've ever heard. And the fact that you went through this, like I said, you lost your business, you lost your relationship, you spent $250,000. You basically are destitute at this point because of this case. And yet you still are like, hey, how can I help the next person? How can I help, make sure this person's okay? How can I make sure I take care of this guy when he's getting out of prison so we can get a CDL so he can take care of his family?
I mean, I do still have $1 million. I'm not totally desolate.
It's not liquid. Let me say that. Yeah, it's coming to you, but it's not liquid.
It's not liquid, but I still make pay. I get enough money off it every month that I ain't got to do nothing if I don't want to. So I mean, I'm good in that regard at least. All my liquid reserves are gone. Yeah, but
hey, Dickie,
I looked. Yep.
We got a question from Alexis Adams. She asked if you train canine or service dogs, which I thought was a really cool question coming from somebody because that is in fact you.
Yeah, it is me. Yes.
Yeah.
I did. I started Canines for Warriors. I used to train canines And I bought a very large facility in South Florida. At one point, I was the largest police dog trainer on the East Coast. And my business partner and fiance was killed in a drunk driving accident. And I just couldn't do it anymore. So I transitioned. I was going to get out of the business. My son was overseas as a foreign exchange student. He came home the day after COVID lockdown.
They say you're muffled again.
College. I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yeah,
That's better.
All
Quit letting it fall down your into your hoodie, Bubba.
Yeah, I'll move it real quick.
but yeah,
You can
it's
hold
just one of
it
the
and
wildest things.
You could hold it and just have it at your mouth. Hold it
Gotcha.
like a little bit effeminately, and it would look really good.
There you go. How's that for you?
Sounds so much better, bro.
Does that make you feel at home? Something this small being held in the mouth?
I mean, if you want me to do it with mine, bro, I'll join you. No Diddy. No Diddy.
I mean, that's life size for me. So at least we're both being anatomically correct.
But
Yeah.
no, I did, and I was getting out of the business after Roz got killed. And when my son came home and couldn't go to college, he wanted to get into the family business. So we started, again, one of my crazy stories. I was sitting at home, my car broke down. I called these guys and said, hey, look, I know this sounds crazy, but if you move to my town, open a garage, I'll pay for it. And I wound up getting a company called Electrified Garage to move to Ocala. And my son helped open it, ran it. You've been there, Jesse. We had the #1 car at SEMA 2 years in a row. We built 3 cars for Robert Downey Jr. We did a television show. It's done really good. And my son's like, I don't like cars. I want to work dogs. I want to do what you do. So I bought this place in 2000, right when COVID hit. It was closed down.
And on the drive up here, I was run over by a semi. My hand was cut off, and they put it back on. And so my son had to pick up the pace and take over a lot of the stuff that I couldn't physically do anymore. And, and then right as I recovered from losing the arm, then the shooting happened.
Yeah. And again, I wouldn't have believed any of this if I hadn't seen the x-rays and the evidence and the recordings and the video. You've had a storybook life, man. Your life is like a court TV movie, but like all the bad parts of the court TV movie somehow put into one.
But I somehow
that with one hand you were able to do all of that superhero shit that Ken Knight said you did, like the one-handed backflip onto the car where you went instantly into sniper mode with one hand. That's
the only
damn
part
good.
I wish was true.
People are saying they're going to buy you a better mic right now because that one is not working.
It's the DJI mic. Oh, I see what happened. Hold on. Nope. Like it's literally the DJI mic, and it says it's perfect on my end. Let me pull it off and just use my phone mic.
That might be better.
Is that mic better?
That's way better.
Instantly better. Instantly better. So look, man, a lot of people are asking if you have plans to sue the county or the police department for what you've been put through.
Before you say anything, can I hypothetically, if someone were to have been treated horribly by the police department, they could file a 1983 abuse of civil rights complaint, and they could talk to a local lawyer. Having talked to that lawyer today, I'll say maybe you shouldn't answer that question, but I have a feeling that somebody is probably going to be paying a lot of money in the next 12 to 16 months.
I'll take
Very
that
well
as an
put.
answer.
Yeah.
That was a very good question.
Yeah. Now, suing the prosecutors is a lot harder, and that's what I'm wondering about because, again, he admitted on the stand to violating the canon of ethics. And he was like, I didn't think it was important. Like, bro, where did you get your license? Like Apple Jacks? This is just crazy. But I don't know that we'll be able to get past the immunity that they have, but I would be really interested in seeing them held accountable as well.
Especially with them dropping the charges. I think that gives them a little bit more protection because they can say we didn't actually prosecute them fully.
We were able to text me that. We were able to avoid that by seeing that it was a bad case and dropping it. Like I think that's one of the reasons. I think that's what happened, honestly. I think that when they got in trouble
with the Brady violations that they did, they went and finally ran it up, and the executive team looked at the charge for the first time and was like, this is absolutely crazy. There's no way you can move forward with this.
Yeah. Well, I want to say I'm glad you're free because I was worried to death about you because even though I thought you were crazy when you reached out, even though you can be kind of a jerk sometimes, you really are one of the most kind-hearted, like good guys that I've met. And I've watched all the good that you've done for me and for other people. And the idea that you were getting drugged through the mud for that and that you lost so much from that, it really broke my heart.
Thank you.
It broke
Yeah,
mine.
that's facts. I would echo every bit of that, man. Me and Jax were over here
too.
praying.
Absolutely.
We were over here. Like, I wasn't stressed until they didn't drop the case. I swear to God, bro, I thought they would come at you with like a suspended sentence and 3 years or 5 years of probation the morning of trial. And I kept telling you that. I'm like, just have faith, bro. It's fine. The second deal, the first 2 deals you never take. It's always the third deal. And you don't need to take it because they're going to drop the case as soon as you don't take that third deal. And none of that shit happened. And I was like, oh, man.
Not only did none of it happen, they came in real cocky, like real arrogant. They wanted
with new charges the day before the trial.
The day of the trial.
Yeah, on
They
Easter
added more
Sunday,
charges
bro.
the day of.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the craziest thing I've seen. And I think what really bothered me the most is, like you said, you asked me today, like what I had thought or what I hadn't been worried this whole time. And then when they actually brought the case, I was like, man, maybe I'm worried. And you said the problem is every single time there's been a ruling, it's gone against me. And again, probably 10 of those rulings, 15 of those rulings were just totally unjust and would have been overturned on appeal. And then when Tammy Deal got up on the stand and boldface lied, I was like, bro, maybe you're right. Maybe you are screwed. Like this, I don't understand how everything can happen in the world. Like this doesn't make any sense. And I remember that was the moment that I felt the doubt. Like that was when I started to lose hope. Like, man, maybe you're just like cursed. Maybe you got some really bad karma. And then we went in the next day and it turns out they were like, okay, we admit we didn't have any evidence all along. I mean, I was relieved for you, but I was also so fucking angry. Because I was like, you literally put this man through 2 years of hell. And if you had just reviewed your notes and done any bit of investigation, you would have known from day one what that same reporting officer knew, which is that you were the victim of a crime and that he was the perpetrator. And instead of punishing the person who committed the crime or holding them accountable, they punished you for being the victim of a crime for 2 years.
Yeah. And I mean,
Well,
if they dropped the charges before we got to that point, it would have saved me 50 grand. I mean, it cost 50 grand just for the week of trial.
That's insane.
And not to mention that, but if you didn't have your resources, you would be in prison right now. They would have you in
I would
prison.
have had to take the 11-month deal.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you had a public defender, they wouldn't have offered you that deal. They would not have offered you that deal had you gone in there with some court-appointed attorney, bro. They would have offered you something much nastier. And if you didn't take it, they would have gotten that win.
Yeah.
And this
Craziest
isn't
thing
lost
I've ever
on me.
seen.
So there was a first-degree murder charge in trial in the next courtroom over. And it was a self-defense case also. Guy was at a bar, got into a bar fight. Dude pulled a knife, stabbed him. He shot the guy that stabbed him. Told the cops he shot him, told him it was his fault, did everything that you're quote-unquote supposed to do right. When it went, he had a 2-day trial. I was scheduled for 5, could have gone 7. He only got 2 days. And at the end of Tuesday, they turned it over to the jury and did not give the jury self-defense instructions.
And told them
That if you think he shot him, you have to find him guilty. So they found him guilty. And my understanding is in PA, if you're found guilty of first-degree murder or first-degree attempted murder, it's an automatic life sentence with no sentencing
hearing. So they went straight from you're guilty to you get life to go to prison. So while I'm walking out, he's being walked back.
Craziest
That's
thing.
absolutely nuts, dude. I've never heard of giving a jury no self-defense instructions. Like, I don't know if that's just a Commonwealth thing, but that's absolutely ludicrous to me.
Yeah.
Well, Jesse, you were there when they refused to give me self-defense instructions in the beginning.
Well, to be fair, because I'm trying to be the objective one, they said we can't rule on that yet until we've heard the evidence and whether the evidence could support self-defense. So he didn't preclude it, but based on everything else that judge did and every other ruling he made, I would not have been the least bit surprised if he had refused to give the jury self-defense instructions.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they removed my video because one of their arguments was it was detrimental to their case. Isn't evidence you put on in your defense supposed to be detrimental to their case?
And just for reference, this was a video done by the crash scene recreation expert who is a DC cop for 25 years, who works for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, who works for the Department of Justice. Like, This was an amazing, objective person who analyzed the case, and then they built a video off of his findings. And this video was excluded because, like you said, it was prejudicial against the Commonwealth's case, but also because they said, well, we can't know the source of where this came from. So we can have a picture up, but if we have it on a slideshow, that's not okay. Like, it was one of the worst rulings I've ever seen. It was one of the many bad rulings in this case. And it was just an example of where, from start to finish, the deck was stacked against you. You really didn't have a chance other than the $250,000 you paid for your defense to bring the truth to light.
Well, it was the judge's first criminal trial ever.
Yeah.
He's been a judge since 2003 and never done a criminal case. And they throw this one at him.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And, you know, while we're going through this, Jess, like, not only were the motions stacked against me, but jury selection. We pulled 50 people in. We asked for 100. We got 50. Out of that 50, 17 were a person of color. I tried to get every one of them on the jury. They struck every person of color in there. It was only 100% white jury. And I would say they got 14 people, 12 jurors, 2 alternates. And I would say out of that, 8 or 9 of them were under the age of 25 with no kids. So that whole parental commonality of, this is my child, this is my livelihood, I would die to defend them or kill somebody to hurt them. They literally picked 9 people that didn't have kids.
Yeah. It was wild. I mean, the whole thing, again, if I hadn't seen the evidence, if I hadn't been in trial, I wouldn't have believed it. I would be like, whoever wrote this script needs to get in touch with reality. This is not how things work. But no, that's how things work in York, Pennsylvania.
I mean, I'm just going to throw it out because I want to. The head officer that corrupted the whole case, his name is Jack Asper. Like,
we
if
talked
I
about him.
wrote a crime scene and made a detective named Jackass or Jack Asperger, y'all would be like, you got to go back and rewrite this. That's not real.
100%.
Rich, real quick, we got Matthew's opinion, who is in PA, and he said, I live in PA. I thought we were allowed to protect ourselves because you guys do have it's castle doctrine,
Castle
correct?
doctrine of a car. Yeah.
So
we have castle doctrine in a vehicle. It got extended because of all the carjackings that were happening in Philly and Pittsburgh. Is they allowed you to have the same defense inside your car that you have inside your home.
It's
never
crazy
left
to me
my car
that
when I fired.
It's crazy to me that even though you were within what is considered your safe place to be able to protect through castle doctrine, that's where you fired your shots from, because it was under attack that they would still pursue this case.
And it was disabled on the first hit, so there was no way for me to go. The car was erroring out. You could hear the errors on 911 going off. There was no way for me to retreat, and he was still hitting me. I mean, we found at least 3 impacts, possibly 4, possibly 5, but my expert can testify to at least 3.
And it drives me crazy that you know this, we know this. It was on the 911 tape. Like, I want to reiterate, this is not like some complicated he said, she said. Everything that happened was on the 911 tape. The dispatcher was listening. The responding officer said, clearly you were a sitting duck and that man attacked you. Like, everything in the people that actually were involved said you were innocent, that you were attacked, that you were the victim of a crime. But everybody who came after, from Jack Asper to the prosecutor, said, well, we know what you said because you were actually there and did the investigation, but we know better because I've been a police officer for 20 years or because I'm a 25-year-old district attorney who doesn't know anything. It's just insane hubris. It's insane. I don't even just malice, just apathy. Like, people are signing numbers or signing dates and they're saying, oh, well, this is a person's life. We're going to make this guy lose everything. We're going to stick him in prison for life. But, like, I get a win. It's absurd.
The crazy part is that this whole incident was only between 17 to 20 seconds, I think.
It's at 17 to 20 seconds.
And they're trying to place me outside of the car firing either before the impact. You can hear the impact. You can hear the shots. Like, it's all plain as day. So they literally threw the timeline from 911 out and said, this is the timeline we're going with. But at the same time, we matched up the 911 calls to the videos, so we know it's all accurate.
It's
well, if
insane.
it's accurate, then you know I'm in the car because you can hear me trying to get the car into gear. If I'm outside of the car before the impact, then there's no way it falls within the 17 to 30 seconds and you made it accurate. So they literally say these things that make it sound like they've done their job and then just change the entire parameters of it.
That's crazy. Well, Richard, like I said, I am glad that you're free. I'm glad you no longer have this burden on your shoulders. I'm glad I was able to buy you lunch. I'm glad you were able to buy me a fancy dinner that was way better than the lunch we had today. I'm really grateful for you. I'm really grateful for the support. I mean, even like as we were driving there, you were holding me accountable on something in my life. And you can be kind of a jerk about it, but again, you're one of the few people who does the thing that I value most. You hold me accountable for the decisions I make and the things that I do, and you tell me the hard truths, the things that I may not want to hear, because that's the important part. And again, that's one of the reasons I really value in my life. And that's one of the reasons I was so scared to lose you, because I need people like that, and there aren't a lot of people like that in the world.
Thank you. I mean, you wouldn't have lost me. I still would have called you from prison on 5-minute phone calls and told you what you were doing wrong. But it wouldn't have been the same.
I agree.
No,
So-
it's what, and you know, the crazy part is you never think like defending your family in something like this, that they can still then tell you can't be around your son and still lose. I lost my son for those 2 years.
It's
Like,
insane.
It just, the laws make no sense in this whatsoever. And I said this earlier when we talked, you know, it's really sad that people's lives are at play at this, and the DA's sole rating system is based on how many years they give somebody or how many wins they give, not how many innocent people they find, not how many people they find that are prosecuted that shouldn't be prosecuted, not how many corrupt police officers they find, but this person is on my docket. If I get this win, I get this bonus. Not really a bonus, but I get an attaboy and I get a promotion. If I get this many years, I get a better attaboy. And if I get this many years, I get I'll get promoted into second seat or first seat district attorney. And that's literally how their job performance is raised. So they're completely demotivated to stop any type of corruption or stop any type of crime. And had, I not spent, like my lawyers shut their law firm down for the last month just to go through and memorize this case. I had an attorney whose sole job was to go through and bring up every document towards everybody that was on the stand, every statement, everything that they had ever spoke, have it cross-referenced. So anytime, and read along with them while they're on the stand, and anytime there was a discrepancy, write it down, highlight it, pass it forward to the table so they could do it. It took 4 people to be able to move through this case with the efficiency that we had, and we were still losing.
By the way, they say your audio is bad, and we're getting a lot of questions. People want to know your whole name, and they want to know where this happened. So do you want to give some details about yourself or where this happened, or where people can find you on social media, or where people can find you on a desert island, depending on what you choose?
I'm actually looking at a winery in Argentina, but yeah.
Okay.
My full name is Richard Starks.
It happened in York County, Hanover, Pennsylvania. If you search Richard Starks, Hanover, Pennsylvania, you'll definitely find the purple Tesla with pink rims and all the stories that can tell you about it. And if you go to York District Attorney's Twitter page and scroll down a little bit, you'll see JD's comment talking about, the trial that they started for the first-degree murder charge on me, or first-degree attempted murder charge on me.
Yeah, I've got a comment there too. So
yeah,
I
and hopefully next week,
bunch of whole ass clowns, bro.
Yeah,
and hopefully next week I'm back in Florida, and hopefully within 6 months I've bought the winery in Argentina.
well, it was really good for me to see you, and I appreciate you being out here telling your story. And I'm going to try to get you a book deal and a movie deal and everything, because man, your story again, if it wasn't true, it would be too unbelievable to be true. So yeah, we need to get this out there. So
what's really crazy is I had done I got in trouble as a juvenile, and I was a juvenile offender and sentenced, and came out, turned my life around, never got in trouble again, and became very successful. And a month before the shooting, I was asked to be in a documentary called The System, America's Pandemic, that you can find on Amazon. And it talks about me a little bit. And basically my brother Jabari, who was in an organization called Black Mafia Family, got out, turned his life around. Now he's a single dad, runs a successful business in Atlanta. He's become a movie director. And he's wrote 3 movies. First one was Miles in the Life, which is his life story about being a drug trafficker for BMF. And then he wrote the one where he went through and found everybody that he knew that had gone to prison or had run in and been successful. So I was in that movie giving my story about how not to be in trouble, what to do to be successful, how not to go to prison, like how you should live your life so that you don't have these problems. And a month later, I'm facing first-degree attempted murder charge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
but you
crazy.
did stay out of prison, so I'll give you that. You did that right.
And you did
Only
protect your
because I was
son,
so
which is
successful between the two and had $250,000 to burn.
yeah.
Like, look, man, if you hadn't showed up the way that you did, that dude could have come back and you might not have a son breathing anymore, bro. So
100%.
as a parent who's lost a kid, I just want to let you know, man, like you did exactly what you had to do. And it was
Thank
the
you.
system that failed you. And one of our comments here from Intellectual Iconoclasm said that you were basically a political prisoner. Lee Edwards, another one of our friends here, said a loyal jerk is a whole treasure. And I loved that, bro. Because you are absolutely, you could be a spicy friend, but you are a true motherfucking friend through and through.
And thank you. And let me say this real quick. You know, my son is was a 20-year-old young man when this happened. He came up here. We started a doggy daycare. There's nothing thuggish about a doggy daycare. There's nothing, you know, criminally intended about it. Like, we played with puppies all day long, spoiled them, and sent them home. While he was doing that, the community didn't have enough first responders. He put himself through EMT school. He went down to the fire department. He volunteered as a volunteer fire department. He volunteered on the ambulance crew. And he wanted and found a fiance, wanted to get married, and wanted to raise his kids in this town. And he would have been an asset to this town. And this town lost a young man because he's moving and he doesn't feel safe here, and they turned his back on him, that could have saved their grandmother's life. Like, there's no ambulance service here. Like, he was starting that. They had bought an ambulance to try to help out, and he was going to do that. And, you know, he gave it all up, and he got a special forces contract with the Air Force. He leaves on the 30th of this month, and I couldn't be prouder of him and happier for him to leave this town. But they literally ran somebody out of this town that could have been an asset to them.
You know, you talked about something else today. You said that anybody who has a firearm should get training, which you've gotten, and should also do
100%.
what?
Anybody that carries a firearm or has a firearm at home should get some type of insurance. And there's all kinds. There's I think it's the USPCA, maybe is what it's called, a USCCA. It's the United States Concealed Carry Organization. There's another one, Lawyers for Firearms.
Yeah, your sound is terrible still.
And I don't know how. Like, I'm not over the mic. I have it right to my face. I'm sorry. Is that any better?
Not really.
No? Hello? How about that?
No. Try again?
Nope. I don't know. I don't know what happened. Anything?
Well,
you say
you
it
know
for
what?
me, Jesse.
Okay, what you were talking about today is it's really important to get insurance in the case of a self-defense shooting, because you spent $250,000 at trial to be vindicated, and most people don't have access to that kind of money. So if you ever are in a position to have to defend yourself, having that insurance would cover the entire cost of the trial, entire cost of defense. It would basically be the thing that would save you, because you saved your life, but that doesn't necessarily save your business or your reputation or your basically finances.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
it's the most important thing you can do.
Rich, you are such a, like, people are not going to be able to get a taste for who you really are with the audio problems that you're having. You are one of the most uniquely intelligent people, and your retention is insane. You are knowledgeable in so many different things. So I'd love to have you back on a live sometime when we can actually hear you and we can throw some shit back and forth, man, because our conversations are literally the most insane conversations that I have with anybody. So let's make sure that we can do that. And you know, maybe you could be in your studio next time or whatever. I know you've got a dope studio out there. And I'm really, really glad that you're here and that you're out and that you get your life. And I'm sorry that you spent 2 years and $250,000 fighting for that, when really they should have been like, attaboy, good job, man. Way to protect your family and your property and yourself. It really sucks that our system, like, I've been disillusioned to our system watching what the fuck they've put you through. I've always thought that if somebody goes to prison and they're convicted, I've always been like, it's so rare that an innocent person goes. And I watched an innocent person almost go, because if you didn't have the resources that you had, bro, if you weren't able to be able to pull these things for yourself, you'd be in prison right now, bro. If you were just some broke dude, you'd be in prison right now.
100%.
And so it made me rethink the way that I view things about how many people might be in there that are actually innocent.
I think there's more than anybody believes there is, bro.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So
I've
thank
got to
you. I
take
would
off.
love to come back.
I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your time. Jesse, thank you so much for coming on here and chopping it up with us, bro. You are an inspiration. Anybody that is not following Jesse Crossan, you should absolutely be doing that. And I will see you guys soon, man. Appreciate y'all. One love.
Thank you.